State and local governments hold highly sensitive data ranging from personally identifiable information on individual citizens to national security and critical infrastructure information. Securing this massive volume of data can be difficult, but not doing so can be even more catastrophic for a nation. The risk of being breached and the threat of ransomware attacks continues to increase as budgets and IT staff remain constrained and as agencies rely increasingly on a wide network of contractors and third-party suppliers. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and joining us today is Rob Lalumondier, Vice President, Enterprise and Public Sector at Sophos, to talk about how adversaries are shifting their tactics and finding new ways to exploit agency vulnerabilities and what state and local governments can do about it. Rob, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Wyatt. Good to see you again, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Rob, let me start by asking, as a leading provider of threat intelligence and security tools, what are the primary security challenges that you're seeing in state and local government agencies?
Yeah, Wyatt, all government entities, state and local, federal public education institutions have a mission for providing citizen services and protecting national security. So this means that these organizations often have very large attack surfaces and enormous amounts of sensitive data. So, when you put those two factors together, it results in constant attacks from nation-state actors, cyber criminals, and hacktivists that are interested in espionage and financial gains through, various data extraction attacks and ransomware, of course. So, here in the U.S., we've undergone huge efforts to modernize and rapidly advance digital transformation and really enhance citizen services to speed up our government operations. But these advances have really accomplished that goal. The speed of government is faster than it used to be, but we've also greatly increased the attack surface by which increase the attack surface in which in turn will increase the overall difficulty of protecting sensitive national security and citizen data.
Well, touching on ransomware for a minute, it obviously remains a critical challenge for public sector organizations. How are threat actors changing their tactics, though, and what vulnerabilities should state and local agencies be paying greater attention to now?
For a long time, security pros have been relying on tools and technology solutions to prevent cyber attacks, but the bad actors are increasingly using relatively non-technical techniques, like they're exploiting stolen credentials to gain access to legitimate IT tools, or they're targeting just unpatched vulnerabilities that are commonly known. These can really make these attackers look like authorized users in your network and allow them to avoid triggering automated detection tools. So, many technologies struggle to tell the difference between an attacker that's exploiting stolen credentials in your network versus legitimate IT staff using common tools such as RDP or PowerShell. This remote desktop protocol, or RDP, is something that really concerns me about state and local agencies because even one unmanaged, unprotected, or even underprotected machine can expose your entire organization to remote ransomware attacks. So there are a lot of legitimate reasons that agencies may be using RDP, including, remote troubleshooting and administration of systems. But what makes these remote attacks even, more difficult to manage than other ransomware attacks is that the malicious actor gains access to that one weak machine, and then they can use RDP to encrypt files on protected machines throughout your network. So this can all happen like right under the nose of your endpoint protection because most of these technologies focus on detecting ransomware files and processes on the local endpoint, not what's happening on remote endpoints. So what I think is actually really interesting about this is that this isn't a new thing, but it continues to be such a major threat. Microsoft had reported about 60% of human-operated ransomware attacks now involve malicious remote encryption. And our researchers at Sophos have found even higher rates out in the wild, with up to 90% of attacks abusing RDP, which is really the highest level we've seen since 2020.
Sounds serious and growing of greater concern. When you think about where state and local governments are, they're constantly dealing with continuing budget and IT staff constraints. And, so what are some of the best strategies for defending against these new types of attacks in light of that?
One of the first things I think is make sure you're staying up to date on the vulnerabilities posted by CISA. On their website, not only do they provide, list of known exploits, but they also list misconfigurations and weaknesses known to be used in ransomware campaigns. A few other actions that security leaders can take is to reduce their risk to block RDP access for those who don't actually need it by using least privilege principles. And you can also create rules on your network firewall to mitigate some of the risk. And then, of course, something that I know is a broken record thing that I think every leader in security should be saying is always, always, always use multi-factor and network authentication to approve remote device connections.
And then what are some ways that Sophos has helped state and local governments protect their data more effectively in light of these new tactics? Can you share some practical use case examples?
I sure can. Sophos is one of the most robust product security and service portfolios in the industry, and we have many ways we protect our customers. But one specific tool that we really use that gets to the heart of stopping all types of ransomware is called CryptoGuard. And what's unique about CryptoGuard is that rather than just looking for malicious files and processes, it actually analyzes the data files for the signs of malicious encryption, whether or not that process may be running on that local machine. So if it does detect malicious encryption, CryptoGuard is going to automatically block that activity and then roll the files back to their unencrypted state. So these attacks, just as a testament to how common these attacks have become, we automatically enable this capability by default on our endpoint protection platform so that organizations are going to have full protection from both local and remote ransomware right out of the box.
And then lastly, what additional advice would you offer state and local leaders on securing, this new class of remote access environments, if you will, and reducing the risks from these third-party vendors? What would you suggest that they consider?
In addition to some of the techniques I described earlier, make sure you have a robust risk management program that's really action-oriented. It's important to identify and prioritize security risks, but taking action on them is absolutely critical. And a lack of a concrete action plan is a trend among organizations that are continually breached due to poor management of remote services. At that point, you may as well be inviting attackers right in the front door. So just to recap on a few of those best practices, make sure you've identified those vulnerable services, reduce them everywhere you can, always, always, always use authentication, and finally, make sure your endpoint protection is up to the remote ransomware challenge.
Well, Rob Lalumondier, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us here and sharing your respective insights on, just this increasing threat from remote devices and some of the tactics and best practices for combating that for state and local governments.
Thanks again for having me, Wyatt. Really enjoyed the discussion.